So I get to start this video off talking about Isidro again. Oh joy. No, really, he's not that bad yet. I'm just getting ahead of myself because this little dude annoys me. But in the last episode I didn't even talk about what Guts was up to at all. I think that's the first, but probably not the last. The story does take a couple of breaks from him along the way to focus on other characters, and it's always a good feeling when we finally get back to him. And here he is trying to take a nap before the sun sets, and Isidro creeps up on him trying to take his sword. But he can't even lift it off the ground. Given that some places online give measurements of Guts' Dragon Slayer sword being about 400 pounds, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, you have some dudes that can deadlift 400 pounds, but then you have Guts that just wields that thing like it's paper. Puck is awake, though, and makes fun of Isidro a bit, and says that he'll train him in his elf dimension style. Puck saying this for the first time here is actually really funny, but it won't be after the 100th time. Guts wakes up and lifts the sword to his back one-handed, and his brand begins to bleed as the sun sets, and his enemies tonight happen to be men and women that were sentenced to the wheel-tortured death, their corpses basically zombified and rolling towards him. We saw just how this torture device was used not too long ago, and apparently it's been a favorite of the torturers, as there are very many of them. And Guts gleefully strikes them down while Isidro just runs. He tries to take his own sword out to fight back, but it just breaks. And this is about the time to decide if you like his comedic addition or not. You tell me. What's more funny is when Guts just tosses him to lower ground and then continues to fight. Guts runs far away from the area until finally he's alone with just Puck. Well, seemingly alone. Out of the mist of the dark night, a familiar face arrives. The Skull Knight greets Guts once more, and makes a remark about him having an elf companion in Puck, even alluding to the fact that he knows it was Puck's elf dust that healed Guts after the eclipse. How exactly he knows this, I'm not sure, but Skull Knight understands well the idea of fate and how certain things are meant to be, for better or worse. He explains that he is heading to the same place Guts is, to continue his crusade against the Inhumans, to which Guts asked him, does he mean that the God Hand will be there? Skull Knight explains, cryptically as he does, that the God Hand only exists in this world near where there's large concentrations of negative aspects of humanity, such as when we saw an image of Slan during the Satanic Orgy, and Conrad in Midland that had been overtaken by the plague. The God Hand's bodies are in a separate realm, but they can sort of visit us here through our ideas. It all goes back to the idea of evil chapter, and its creation was made due to a collective consciousness of human beings. When that consciousness of multiple evil, selfish people gather, the God Hand becomes stronger, and as the Skull Knight explains, when that gathering and concentration of evil reaches its peak, once every 1,000 years, a God Hand can be reborn into our reality. The stage of fate has already been set for this, as every human being had a dream of a white hawk coming to save them. The dream was shared in a collective consciousness, and it was sent out as preparation for the event. Griffith is coming back to our reality, and for that to happen there will need to be an eclipse-like event here on Earth. The fact that both Guts and Casca will be at the Tower of Conviction when it happens is just fate paralleling itself to when both of them were there at the eclipse from before. And with fate being involved, there's no way to prevent it. And Guts scoffs at the idea of fate and destiny as he once did before. He talks about how he was fated to die, but made it out of the eclipse, and that he'll do it again. Skull Knight even has to concede that Guts having the brand and living to this day puts a small kink in the whole point of causality to begin with. He states that Guts is outside the reason of this world because of this. He lives in the interstice, the border between the physical and astral worlds, and that maybe while everything else is just a reflection on the water that can't be changed, Guts is like a fish that can breach that water's surface. That's Skull Knight's cryptic explanation for it all, at least, but it boils down to maybe Guts can make a difference and change things that were not once conceivable to be changed. Skull Knight decides to leave on this note, but not before giving Guts one last cryptic message, that his lover Casca will be left alone, and Guts will need to choose to fight or to rescue. He then walks off into the night on his horse, and Puck makes a very strange comment here, saying that the Skull Knight felt like an elf. My only theory on this is that it may have something to do with Skull Knight's armor, or something that he carries with him. Also, one has to wonder that, can Skull Knight see the flow of time in its own way, like knowing these things that are going to happen before they do? As he warned Guts of the eclipse a year before it happened, and he knows that this eclipse-like event to bring a God Hand member into our reality is about to happen, as well as Guts needing to make a choice to rescue or to fight. Maybe Skull Knight can sort of see the flow of causality, sort of see what fate is planning to do, and this is why he tries to fight against it. Cutting back near the tower, a group of heretics are about to be burned at the stake. Leading the burnings is Farnese, who commands them to start. The soldier Jerome looks sickened that it's so easy for Farnese to do this, and another soldier mentioned she's been doing it since childhood, that right near her home was a burning site, so ever since being a little kid, she's been indoctrinated with the idea that heretics must pay, brutally, with their lives. In Farnese's mind, she remembers the words of Mazgus, to not question faith, to know that what they are doing is for the good of God, and that it is righteous. She is attempting to correct her mindset back to the way it has always been. Only because of meeting Guts and seeing true evil has she begun to question her worldview. But when that worldview was engraved in you from birth, it's not something easy to escape from. Meanwhile, an onlooker recognizes a small boy as the child of one of the burning heretics. He tells the child to prove that he's not a heretic too, and wants the child to throw a torch into the fire. Then, Serpico draws his sword on the man, and states that the child already proved his innocence earlier. Serpico, who hasn't done much as of yet, besides make some snarky comments here and there, and go to rescue Farnese when Guts escaped with her, now takes an action. And it's notable because he seems to be a very reactive character, basing his actions on what Farnese says and is doing, but in this instance is one of the first times we see him act out on his own. But after this, he needs to step away from the burnings, and he has a small conversation with Jerome, during which he admits that he saved the boy because he was in a similar situation once, watching his mother be burned at the stake as a heretic. We get more on this a bit later, but I can't even imagine how traumatizing that must have been. He earned some respect from Jerome as well during this exchange, who admits that he kind of saw Serpico as a stuck-up weakling beforehand. But we know that is a deliberate facade that Serpico puts on. Later, Farnese lays in her bedroom in front of the fire, remembering what it was like as a child watching the burnings. She was just barely over being a toddler, and while witnessing people burning, adults encouraged her to throw sticks of fire at them to continue the burnings. As she did, she saw the shadows of the adults in the fire cheering and dancing. Her child mind put together that, okay, fire equals happiness and approval. So she'd do it again and again, and the adults would continue to praise and dance. The shadows danced, and before she was even old enough to understand the concept of death, she was indoctrinated into this madness. And this is how it starts, in real life as well. A child is a pure blanket vessel, and what you feed it with is what it will grow up thinking is okay. This dark, barbaric religious ritual was used as a source of validation for her, so much so that she was too young to understand it, too young to understand that the happiness and appraisal was turning her on. She was experiencing her first sexual feelings from this. This is why the Farnese that we saw that was possessed by demonic spirits wanted her to embrace her physical side, why she straddled Guts' sword and wanted him to hurt her, why she truly, truly whips herself in that self-flagellation ritual. Her repressed sexuality amplifies itself, and she gets this sick validation that what she is doing is right. That she's a good little girl doing what she's supposed to do, but coming from what deep down she knows is wrong. As Farnese lays here in her bed masturbating to the image of the fire, which reminds her of her youth and the justification she got from the burning, she begins to cry right after, thinking to herself, I'm not in the wrong, trying so hard to convince herself. Her masturbation here is more of a shameful one. It feels so right, but she's old enough and has seen enough now to know that it's not. And how funny and backwards her beliefs have her, where something as normal as masturbation is done over something that is clearly wrong and inhumane like burnings, but her self-flagellation, actually causing her bodily harm, is done simply because she thought freely and questioned faith. Farnese's mind is a playground of psychological problems and nightmares, and the poor girl just doesn't know what's right or how to treat herself, and no one has been able to help guide her. She is absolutely lost. The next day, many of the peasants and refugees are bringing Casca jewelry and presents, believing her to be a powerful witch. Clearly Luca doesn't like this, and as it could draw attention to them doing some form of heresy. and it would put both Casca and Nina in danger. At this point, there's no real reason for us, the reader, to give a shit about Nina, but Luca still does. But as Nina suggests giving Casca over so that they'd be safe, Luca refuses to do that as well. She refuses to put anyone in harm's way from the Holy See, and I really respect her for that. She doesn't know Casca, she's only been there for a few days and can't even hold a conversation, but Luca sees that she's vulnerable and won't use that against her. A hunter from the Holy See begins harassing one of the prostitutes outside, and Luca dashes into her rescue, taking a hit from a whip to protect her. As the whip comes down for a second strike, it is blocked this time by Guts, who's made his way to the camp. I love how he just walks up to the knight and grabs him by the face, asking if he's seen a girl with a brand on her chest. Other knights try to come to his aid, but Guts just tears them apart while all the refugees watch and gasp at how fucking manly he is. Isidro and Puck are there as well, and introduce themselves to Luca, who is able to see Puck, by the way, proving that she isn't blinded by the faith that surrounds her. The knights retreat after they've seen enough of Guts' slaughtering them, and Luca approaches Guts about Casca's whereabouts, and I guess she trusts him enough to want to take him to her. She did just see him kill a bunch of people. Granted, they were the people that subjugate and harass them on a daily basis, but as much as I admire Luca's gentle and caretaking personality, this could have potentially been a really big mistake for her. Luckily it wasn't. Well, not in that way at least. Guts is trustable when it comes to Casca, but Nina is not. Fearing she would be found out, captured, or killed, she takes Casca to run away. She doesn't get far though, as they are met by the people from the cave orgy that saw a display of that demonic power the previous night. It came from Casca's child protecting her, but they think it came from Casca herself, and they've come to get their witch queen. Thankfully again, Isidro spots them doing this, but instead of getting Guts right away, he decides to follow them himself. That little bastard. Cutting back to Farnese, who is at the base of some recent burnings with Serpico standing not far behind her. Azan rushes up to her with the information that the Black Swordsman is there. Farnese immediately swells with fear. Her truth may be facing her soon. So she turns down going after him, as that's not their mission anymore. Protecting Mazgus is their current objective. But also with that information is the news of the cave hideout of the heretics. Joachim, which I guess is actually how you're supposed to pronounce it, I'm really sorry for my ignorance in that sense. Joachim, the boy that Nina brought to the cave and tried to kill when he just got too afraid, had actually survived his fall. And he has now ratted them out. At the cave, Isidro and Puck hide out at the entrance looking in. The congregation of heretics carry Casca on a chair, calling her the Black Witch and Sorceress. They also have Nina, but have stripped her naked, and talk about offering her heart to the witch. The only reasoning for this is they believe Nina was trying to steal Casca away for herself. And it kind of goes back to the conviction the Holy See has in their religion. So do the heretics in their own. But theirs is one of overindulgence. The man wearing the goat mask from the night before walks up to them. And yes, it's just a man wearing a goat head. For now. So Isidro steps in, and yes, he is very useful here. He throws rocks down at the heretics to stop and stall them so that Puck can fly back and get Guts. And he also has a genuinely funny moment when he thinks that if he does good here, he could be rewarded with a prostitute for free, or maybe even all 5 of them at once. I have to admit, these pages are pretty funny. What's not good is Isidro is just here throwing rocks, and as they are in a dark cave, demonic spirits will once again come from Casca's brand. And on top of that, the Holy See Knights are coming by the dozen to arrest the heretics. All of them are here. Farnese, Serpico, Azan, Jerome, all about to have a rude awakening. The Knights enter the cave just as the demonic spirits start to possess the heretics once again. They make them go wild and act like a horde of zombies ready to take on any first victim they see. They attack the Knights, these naked wild maniacs tearing and biting into their flesh. It's like they're all high on bath salts. No, really, that's basically the excuse. Azan mentions the drugs that they put in their cauldrons for rituals and orgies, so all this can be explained away by a drug influence and not an actual demonic entity. Isidro jumps down to try to stop an attacker from going towards Casca and Nina, and meanwhile the goat mask wearing guy, who is not possessed, tries to make an escape through a crevice in the cave, but he is attacked by something. That something whose eyes we saw heavily last time, but still haven't seen ourselves. The Overwatcher of this entire area. Well, it's not revealed to us just yet, but because of what it does to Goat Boy here, we get a good idea of what it could be. Goat Boy jumps back into the big fight as an actual goat monster now. And as we've seen with Rosine and her bug people and my favorite character Zondark, apostles can make servant monsters out of people if they so choose. At the entrance of the cave, Jerome sits outside, having no idea what's happening inside, and tries to give Joachim some comforting words that are just awkward and bad. Then blowing past them is the silhouette of the man himself. Goat Boy singles out Casca and shows her his snake, which is also his penis. You know, Casca has seen a lot of unsolicited dicks. I mean, besides being surrounded by naked cultists currently, if Casca had a Snapchat, that's all it would be, just demon dick constantly. But like demon dick shown to her in the past, Guts slices that thing off. This time by chucking his sword down first, grabbing it, and spinning so fast that he cuts several possessed heretics into pieces with one stroke. And here, in this beautiful full splash page, and this next one of their eyes meeting, Guts and Casca are here next to each other for the first time in 2 years. Farnese sees him as well and trembles. She doesn't want him to escape, and as he runs for it with Isidro, Casca, and Nina, Farnese rushes to him, almost attacked by a heretic. Serpico kills him easily enough, but I love this little face he makes back to Farnese, as he is fully realizing what Guts' very existence is doing to her. It's ripping her apart from the inside, emotionally ruining her sense of identity. And as someone whose main goal is to protect her, he's not having this. Meanwhile, while Guts is on his escape, Goat Boy attacks again. He roughs up Guts a bit to the point where Guts tells Isidro to escape with Casca while he handles the Goat Boy. He recognizes him as a pseudo-apostle and makes his proclamation to it, that he will be taking her back with him, this time for sure. And that'll do it for part 10 in the conviction arc for my series of Berserk videos, so thanks a lot for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. Give this video a like, a thumbs up, share it with your Berserk loving friends, and we'll see you in the next part.